Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm doing my 13.18 ADC tier list, so if you enjoy the content, like and subscribe, and let's get into it. To begin with, there are not a lot of changes moving on in the ADC role. Senna was really the only change last patch, alongside Static Shiv losing a bit of minion damage and gaining 5 AD. So overall, not a huge amount of adjustments, but let's talk about them nonetheless. So Senna is going to move up to the B tier. She is definitely performing a lot better as an ADC. I wouldn't consider her suddenly like a meta ADC, but she's definitely got builds which do work and can find success in the mid and late game. So there is definitely potential with this pick. If you're running something like the Static Shiv build, then you want to go something like Static, Berserkers or Swifties. You can kind of choose depending on if you need the movement speed or whether you just want the raw damage and attack speed. IE or Navori, it really comes down to, do you want your autos to be able to really pack a punch, or do you prefer your abilities having a shorter CD alongside doing a bit more damage? That's kind of the option you have there. A lot of the time Navori does kind of beat out IE, but IE still is the more preferred option, so both definitely have their merits. RFC or Collector is definitely going to be your third option. Collector, really good if you're snowballing, and the lethality on it really helps with the scaling on her healing with her Q, as it has a lethality ratio. Alongside that, Collector, really nice for securing kills. Being an ADC, you really do want kills to kind of spike with your items, and then you can of course go Collector, and of course you can go RFC after you finish your Collector. Really works quite nicely with Senna's range. Alongside that, it helps her soul gathering, and just inherently is a decent item. LDR is usually what you'll round out the build with, as the item gives her a lot of damage towards tanks and a lot of natural armor which people have towards that point. Of course, a lot of these items can be swapped around. If you need to pick up LDR earlier as into a very heavy tank composition, then you can. You might sometimes skip Collector if you're not snowballing, and you can look towards other crit options. However, I definitely recommend mostly going Collector, as your other crit options tend to be fairly lacking, either in win rate or just in the things that they can offer you. So definitely consider your options before skipping it or choosing other options. For the most part, that is the only real change on this patch. Nothing else really shifts that much. Zeri did get a bit tagged by Static being nerfed. So did Sivir, of course. Both of these champions primarily went this item. Not many other ADCs kind of went it. Of course, Caitlyn had it as an option, but a lot of the time Stormrazor was also a good option. And Stormrazor did gain 5 AD. Not a huge buff, but definitely makes it more competitive with the likes of Static and Kraken. One thing you've got to be aware of when it comes to Senna, Kraken is kind of bait. You do definitely prefer items like Stormrazor or Static on her over Kraken. Moving on, other things which I want to talk about is God tier ADCs, of course, being Ashe at the moment. However, Karthus, of course, still a really strong AP option. He's probably the best AP option you can go at the moment. So if you're looking to just like kind of grind out the ladder, then if you need AP, something like Karthus can work quite nicely. If you need AD, Ashe is definitely going to be your go-to. Both these marksmen really, both these options are really good at the moment. Both of them scale quite nicely with Elo as well. Unlike MF, who tends to be more of a low Elo stomper, both Ashe and Karthus scale quite nicely into high Elo. The opposite can be said for the likes of Zeri and Draven, who definitely improve with Elo. Same goes for Kai'Sa. These champions find a lot more success in higher Elo rather than lower Elo, so you tend to skip these champions as like if you're like first timing things. However, if you are kind of like looking to one trick or really try and like min-max, but of course you can pick up these champions as they do provide a lot of success in the higher Elos you go. Kalista, of course, is another one. Yone is another champion which I wanted to talk about. Has gained a bit of popularity, definitely works similar to the Yasuo. However, the champions do have very varying playstyles. I'm definitely going to add him onto the tier list, as I do think he is an option if you want to play something slightly different. If you want the flex factor, then he is definitely a good B tier pick. I'm not quite comfortable with putting him in the A tier at the moment, because he's fairly, it's a very limited sample size of games on him, and a lot of people will either play him incorrectly or not have the experience they really need to kind of pick this champion up and find good amounts of success. So for the moment, he'll be in the B tier, but if you do perform quite well on Yone and he is someone you enjoy, you can definitely take him down to the ADC role. You do have to be careful, of course. Your support might not be a fan of that. That could always be a risk you run into, but then that kind of goes for a lot of things in this game. So definitely an option there. For neutralizers, it's still going to be the same kind of things. Things like your Ziggs, really, really good wave clear, good AP option if you want that kind of just safety, siege potential, and just has a lot of value in the amount of range he has. Sivir, being the AD kind of really strong neutralizer, has really good wave clear, can go things like the Summonary build if you're going something like Static Cleaver Duskblade. I think that is the build you go if you are going for more harass and just in general wave clear and like poke. You can of course still go things like your Kraken Navori build, I believe, as that is going to be the one which you want to go if you're being enabled, rather than playing something like weak side. The other option is something like a Seraphine. She does still work well as an ADC, even though she did get nerfed in the past. Just not as popular as she used to be, but still got decent wave clear. Not too bad damage, more utility focus though, definitely. Can work well with something like a Senna pairing. I'm not a huge fan of Seraphine in general as a champion at the moment, as I feel like she just isn't, she doesn't really excel at a lot of things, but she can kind of do a decent amount. But that can kind of like be awkward to play around sometimes, as you really do limit what that kind of condition of the comp is going to be. Of course, the champ still decent neutralizer, has that going for it, but kind of limited in other factors. Not the greatest CC bot, not the greatest amount of damage, but definitely options there. Other things are like counter picks. Actually, let's talk about blind picks, because those are all the main ones which want to work. So Zeri, still really good blind pick, has relatively weak early game, but can definitely spike off 1-2 items. Something like an static IE is definitely her go-to core. People, I believe, still go Navori. However, the IE version definitely does have a higher win rate, and people are finding more success on it. Kaiser, relatively strong in high elo still, has options in build, whether it's your AD, your crit, on hit, kind of like a hybrid sometimes. I know people go things like Umbral Glaive or Duskblade Nashers, which is just kind of, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I know it does work in certain circumstances. Just the idea of picking up AD items alongside Nashers is kind of awkward, because Nashers, of course, has an AP ratio, and you tend to want the AP to really like allow this item to spike and kind of have a core playstyle. When you kind of dip into both, you can kind of lose what you're meant to be doing during the game. So it's up to you. Really, just do your research and kind of just play what you prefer. Draven, really, really high DPS early on into the game. Can snowball really hard. If you're smurfing, this tends to be the champion you go to, as his DPS, of course, insanely high. Really good builds at the moment. Does a lot, and has really good snowball potential. But those are just the main factors of Draven. Other option, of course, is Samira, but I'd say Samira is less blindable. She's more of a counter pick and can kind of come in against a couple of champions. Things like I know she does struggle into Xayah, I believe, but there are other matchups you can play her into and definitely find a decent amount of success. Yeah, the other one is Ezreal. Ezreal still is just a really good pick at the moment. Has a really good time. The current meta, things like Triforce being strong at the moment do definitely enable him quite well. Things like Manamune. I know that like some people go with the Essence Navori, however, it just doesn't perform as well as his Triforce build. But it's still there, definitely. Of course, things like Shroud is always going to be a go-to item on Ezreal for your armor pen, as it enables his Qs to slow on impact. Alongside that, you can run things like Frozen Heart into heavy AD comps, more into AP comps, GA if you really value the stasis, and you can kind of make use of the revive ability of the item. That is always an option there. I believe Xayah got nerfed. I might be slightly trolling here. I think Xayah did get nerfed, but her overall power didn't dip too much, as it was mostly focused towards early game, and Xayah's late game is still decently intact compared to where it was last patch. It was a bit of E cooldown and a bit of base health loss, but the health is gained back by about level 8, I believe. It was like 30 health loss, and then like I'm gonna quickly look it up because I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head. I know it was a it wasn't a huge change. It was like 2 seconds on E. Overall, just a slight tap down to Xayah. Yeah, lost a very limited amount of win rate, but then I'm pretty sure a lot of champions that actually lost win rate as like ranks kind of were more aligned. So yeah, Xayah still an A tier pick. There is a chance that she can drop down with other champions being buffed, Jhin of course being buffed next patch. But yeah, overall, that's kind of all I wanted to talk about. Not a huge amount of changes, and I'll probably make some Worlds videos. I'll talk about what kind of things I believe are going to be picked, why some things should be picked, which we might not actually see, and I'll try to kind of make content around it. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.